So we hope we are rolling now.
Nearly, Chair. Yeah, we're ready, Chairman.
Okay, fine. So we will start the meeting. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is a meeting of the Waverley Borough Council Value for Money Overview and Scrutiny Committee. My name is Peter Martin. I'm the chairman. We have Joan Hegan with us, who is the vice chairman. We should also have present, and I think they're all present and correct, Roger Blishen, Jerome Davidson, Jerry Hyman, Peter Marriott, Stephen Mulliner, Peter Nicholson, and Julia Potts. We have a number of officers, some of which will take an active part in this meeting, namely Graham Clark, who is the Section 151 officer, Peter Vickers, who is the Senior Finance Director. And we have also Rosie Plasto-Mellum, and I think we've got Debbie Smith joining us as well. Is that right? We've got Annie Wrighton with us. I think I've got all of the officers. Apologies if I haven't named you. We've got Georgina, who is with us for the first time, and Kimberly, as ever, looking after the practical side of things. So welcome to you all. We have Paul Follows, an executive member, and also we have Mark Merriweather, the portfolio holder for finance, who will be speaking to the meeting. I think we've also got John Gray, another councillor and I don't think we have any other councillor observers. Is that right? Have I named everybody?
Robin Taylor, the head of policy and governance, is just coming in as well.
Oh, Robin Taylor's come in. Okay, very good. And we've also got for later in the meeting, David Allam is joining us, or is already with us, and Kelvin Mills should be with us. So right, I think that names everybody in the meeting. Let us move on then firstly to the minutes of the previous meetings, which was the 9th of September and the 21st of September. There is some nomenclature of the meeting of the 21st, which was our call-in meeting, which needs to be slightly changed, but none of the wording is changed. Are you happy for me at a later point to sign those minutes as a record, as a true record of the meetings that we had?
Great.
Okay, fine. Thank you. Nobody disagreeing with that? Okay, thank you very much indeed. Let us move on then to apologies for absence and substitutes. There are no absences, there are no substitutes, and I've already dealt with those who are here. Then let us move on to declaration of interests. Are there any declarations of interest? I don't think any have been advised to me before the meeting. Are there any interests that anybody would like to disclose now? Okay, I will take silence as a no. Item 4, questions from members of the public. Are there any questions from members of the public, Georgina?
No, councillor. There
are none of those. So, and item 5, are there any questions from members, Georgina?
We've had none. None
received. Okay, thank you. Right, ladies and gentlemen, we have a very full agenda this evening. We've got the biggest item that we need to consider is the medium-term financial plan. This is part of the agenda papers. It's also part of the supplementary agenda that was sent out, and item 6 was indeed also then reissued. I think the way I want to play this is that Peter Vickers perhaps will open up and give a short introduction. I think the portfolio holder, Mark Merriweather, has a few slides, I think, to share with us, and then we will move into questions session. So, Peter, if I could look to you to introduce this agenda item. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. So the MTFP paper in front of you is a continuation of the contingency budget that was addressed in and approved by full council in August, where a commitment was made to look at the ongoing impact of COVID across all of our finances and understand the implications going forward. So that's what's in the document in front of you. There's a full assessment of that in the actual report itself, and there are 3 supporting annexes that contain the detail in the numbers. So the Annex 1 gives you the revised summary of the MTFP that was set in and adopted in February. Annex 2 gives you the impact from the contingency budget that's approved in, well, the ongoing impact from contingency budget approved in August. Annex 3 gives a list of reserves that are usable for the general fund in relation to playing into the medium-term strategy and resolving the problem. So within the Annex 1, the structure of the numbers, it just gives you the first panel of Annex 1, just gives you what the budget shortfall is and the key items in there. And that's all based on adjustments from what we call base budget, base being 2021 original budget that was approved in February. The panel below that talks about the way the budget was planned to be addressed, the shortfall was planned to be addressed in February. And that is a review of the key targets in there and just having a look at the performance of those targets so far to date and the impact that the current pandemic is having on those targets. The key areas broken down are council tax, so there's some key assumptions going into that as there is an impact. The property investment strategy, the business transformation program that's underway, and the commercial strategy to address a longer term income stream. So that's the key parts of that. What the report doesn't do is it doesn't give any, the report in front of you doesn't give any solutions to the problem at the moment. Those are things that are being worked through at the moment and will be coming in front of the ONS committee again in January, mid-January, and then a full budget for next year and a resolved medium-term financial plan, a fully updated one, will be tabled at the same time at February Budget Council. So the ONS committee this evening are being asked to review the detail of the document in front of you, the challenges included in that, look ahead at budget setting and try to review the risk issues and make suggestions to be included and considered within the next 6 weeks or so before we have to pull together a position to get into the February Budget Council paperwork. So Councillor Merriweather will do a short presentation just on the overarching situation that's emerged from this review, and then we can go into some discussion after that. So over to Councillor Merriweather.
Thank you. Councillor Merriweather, would you like to take us through your charts now? Thank you.
Bear with me while I unmute here. Right, there we are. So thank you, Peter. As the first non-Peter to speak this evening. So we are going to, I'm just going to quickly trot over where we are. As Peter Vickers said, tonight isn't about answers. We are halfway through the second lockdown that we've experienced since March, and we're updating numbers that we approved only 9 months ago pre-COVID back in February. We've updated this year's budget with our revised contingency budget that we agreed in August, and this is an extension of that work, really trying to identify and start to quantify the problems that we face going forward beyond this financial year, and start to figure out what we're going to do about them. So we have, the starting point was what we agreed back in February. This was our original medium-term financial plan. And we normally look at ourselves in terms of 4 elements: our net service cost, the council tax that we raise, the revenue that we get from the government by way of grants and the 5% of business rates that we currently get to retain, and then the amount that we put into reserves to cover the other commitments that we make financially. And the general issue that we've been facing is the decline in business rates that we have experienced and will continue to experience, the evaporation of central government grants, and cost pressures that we face in our expenses. So this slide grosses those up because the fundamental direction of our medium-term financial plan has not only been to control our costs, but also to generate revenue where we can to offset the losses in retained business rates and government grants. Now this year, it all went to pot as a result of COVID. Our costs we did manage to contain with some emergency measures that were in the revised contingency budget. But the biggest single impact for us, of course, was loss of revenue from our leisure centres and from our car parks. We have received £1.5 million of government support so far. But when we did our revised contingency budget, we determined that absent any further funding, we would draw down on our reserves this year rather than contribute to them as we normally do. And we already also agreed in August that to the extent that we do get more support from central government for our lost income, that will be used to reduce the amount that we draw down from our reserves. The next years, 22 through to 24, that we were looking back in back in February, obviously need to be completely revisited. So in your packs, you have at Annex 1 some detailed analysis which looks at this problem split into two. It looks at the shortfalls, the pressures that we are facing outside of our control, and the measures that we take to deal with those issues as best we can. And in terms of the time horizon, back in February, we were looking at a medium-term financial plan for the 4 years to 23-24. And what we've done here in anticipation of next year is we've rolled that out for another year. And in terms of the terminology that we use, we look at changes within a particular year based on the prior year. We look at what they mean for that individual year's budget cumulatively. And then we look at what the total amount at stake is over this 4-year horizon. So, for example, in terms of the pressures that we face, they ramp up, particularly now because of COVID, over the 4 years, and the total value for all of the 4 years combined of the shortfall that we face is about £17 million. So just looking at the pressures now, rather than the measures, this summary looks at the 5 years, particularly the 4 now that we're revising. And in here, I've got updated numbers that we're looking at now compared to the original numbers that we were looking at back in February. And you will recognize the common threads that have come through are budget pressures from inflation and from retained business rates. So we only get to keep 5% of the business rates we collect, and we expect that to fall as our share falls. In February, we expected that to accelerate in 21-22. We now believe that that acceleration will be deferred for another year, but we still expect our share of retained business rates to decline to zero over the medium-term financial plan. But I've highlighted in red here really the things that have changed, and of course COVID and the consequences of COVID are the headline ones here. So on COVID, you've got in your annexes at Annex 2 a breakdown of these various numbers. Obviously leisure centres are in there. These are the ongoing impacts of COVID beyond this financial year. So in 2021, 22, we expect COVID directly to cost us another £2.7 million. And when I say expect, I do draw your attention to all the caveats that are in the report as to what information we've got to go on. But our current best estimate is that there will be that impact in 21-22. And at the moment, with all the uncertainty that's going on, we hope that that impact will start to reverse and unwind through the remaining 3 years of the financial period. But that tells you that COVID will be impacting us directly for at least 4 years to come. As a result of COVID, interest rates are as close to zero as they can be. They haven't gone negative yet, but that's obviously a risk. And we expect our treasury management interest to fall below what we have experienced in the past. We've also allowed in here an income volatility provision of £1 million. That will start next year, and we're not unwinding it. So we're saying that that £1 million will survive through the 4 years of the medium-term financial plan. And to put it in context, £1 million is 8 weeks, 2 months worth of our income, which hopefully will remind us all of how sensitive we are to changes and shortfalls in our income. So what about the measures? Well, this presentation, this stage, this report isn't about measures, but what I have done in here is I've just reminded us all of the various elements of measures that we were looking at back in February. Some of them may be impacted by COVID. Some of them may have additional capacity. So, for example, if you look at the property strategy, our strategy is to increase property income by £1.2 million through 23-24, and we, for example, will be exploring extending that horizon, increasing the overall target, and whether there's any capacity to advance any particular investments. And we are rewriting at the moment, or redrafting, the property investment strategy to try and deal with that. But as you can see, these are the places that we've gone to in the past, and we are still investigating where else that we can go in relation to things under our control. So where does that leave us? Well, that leaves us at the moment in a situation where for the 4 years, 21 through 25, we have an unresolved shortfall. If we were to continue as best we can the policy that we've taken this year for our contingency revised budget, we would fill that, for example, through reserves. Our capacity to call on our reserves is extremely limited. All of our reserves are either unusable or earmarked, so we will be robbing Peter to pay Paul, but that is what we've done temporarily this year. And if we do get extra money from the government to replenish the reserves in our revised contingency budget, that will leave us at least some capacity to consider doing that for next year if we have to. But this clearly demonstrates that we have two issues. We have the quantum, the value of the money that we need to find, and we have an immediate issue because it's all COVID related.
Mark, could you speed on, do you think?
Yeah, final slide then. So uncertainty is the cloud that hangs over us. We do not know how much more support we will get from the government. At the moment, we believe we will at best get maybe half of our costs and our losses so far for this year, and we have no visibility at all, no idea whether we will get any compensation from them for next year. And we still have our unfair structural funding, where £36 million of the business rates that we collect from the businesses in our borough goes to central government and to Surrey, and that is an important context for the sums that we've been looking at in the last few minutes. Thank you, Peter. I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Right, before we move to questions from the committee, could I just make a couple of observations? Might I say that I think presentationally, you've made it quite difficult for us. We are starting from the £13.1 million budget, original budget that we have for this year. And then in the first column, when you're looking at next year, you're looking at deltas away from that. And therefore, we don't know what the figure is within the 13 million. All we're being given is a delta. So unless we delve back, it's very difficult to see whether a 200,000 or 300,000 change is significant versus what we're starting with. And then thereafter, the changes are from the 2021-22 column. So presentationally, it's quite a challenge to understand what we're doing here. And I think it's quite difficult for the committee to pick up and make its points. So I think presentationally in the future, I think we need to be changing it quite considerably so that we've got the start point very clearly understood before we move away from that. The other point I'd like to make is that the committee did look at this for the impacts on this year, and we did briefly discuss some of the points for the forthcoming years, but I'll come back to the points that we made. But my observation is that the 6.6 million deficit that were being shown in the figures in this report are pretty much exactly the same as the impact that was being identified in July when the committee last looked at it. There are some slight changes in the government grants, which has gone up, but otherwise the things are not much different. Right, having said that, I will throw it open to members of the committee. Anybody, forgive me, I may not be able to spot people as well as I might in terms of who is putting their hand up. Have I got any questions? No questions so far. Okay, but maybe I can ask the first question then. There is a broad assumption in the plans that that 2021-22 won't be significantly different to 2020-21. In fact, you're not expecting much of a recovery. Leisure centres are still heavily impacted, and car parking income is still heavily impacted. I just wondered whether you'd like to comment further on that, and is that a reasonable assumption?
Chairman, do you want me to start? It's Graham. Or...
Yep, Graham, that's fine.
Peter? Sorry, Peter and I are talking. So Peter, Chairman, it is a range of assumptions, and Annex 2, you talked about recovery there, and Annex 2 in the column 21-22 shows the extent to which we think some of those COVID impact related factors will continue into next financial year and indeed beyond. The largest impacts being car parks, income and leisure centres. There's a high degree of uncertainty still around that, and we've explained that in the report. And as Councillor Merriweather said, we factored in quite a sizable, but in pounds and pence terms,
Excuse me.
in proportion to overall annual income on the general fund, not that large provision within the budget to take account of some of that uncertainty. So they are at the moment, Chairman, the best assumptions that we've got and estimates, and certainly welcome the committee's thoughts and comments on that to be passed through to the executive. But these will change in the coming weeks as we build up to setting next year's budget and revising this financial plan projection in February next year. So any comments on these, Chairman, will be very welcome. Happy to discuss them. But at the moment, this is where Peter, Rosie, and myself, working with the portfolio holder, have come to, and we're as comfortable as we can at this stage.
Okay, I think here is the important thing is to understand what the gross figure is. You do mention that in the notes within this year's original budget. The gross the figure for car park income was 5.2 million. During the course of this year, you reckon that nearly 2 million of that is going to be lost. And in what you're saying next year is that it won't be nearly 2 million, it'll be 1.6 million, 1.59 million. So there's a sort of 30% down on the original assumptions that went into this year's plan. So the judgment call as to whether is it 20%, 30% or 40% or some other figure, I guess.
Correct, Chairman. Yes, that's absolutely right. Where our estimate this year is holding up with actuals, but next year, that's a long time to look forward at the moment under these conditions. But you're absolutely spot on. That is an estimated 30% reduction on a normal annual income.
Okay, fine, thank you. And similarly with leisure centres, I think the assumption normally is that we would get income of 500 million coming from the leisure centres. And as I understand it, the 2021-22 that you're looking at says that will be wiped out, and the income we will have is zero. But then over the next 3 years, you will claw it back, and that's the assumption made there. Is that right? That's
right, Chairman. Yeah, 500,000, and that is correct. And I think there's a high degree of uncertainty around that at the moment, just due to not knowing whether there'll be extended or subsequent lockdowns affecting the closure of leisure centres, and that will have an impact on which way that number swings. And I suspect it will swing in the sort of adverse direction, and we will need to be looking at that 1 million that we're setting aside as a potential draw to mitigate that. Okay, and I think here is the presentational point that I would like to make, that if we had the gross figure away on the left-hand side, all adding up to 13.1 million, and we were able to see that in the base assumption that you expect 523, and that you're seeing an impact of 523, that helps in the context of the thing, rather than there's an assumed knowledge of, I think, a good knowledge of the existing plan amongst us. Okay, let's move on. I've got Jerry, and then after Jerry, I'll have we've got Stephen. So, and then Joan Hegan. So, Jerry.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I would like to thank the portfolio holder and the officers for obviously the amount of difficult work that they've done in trying to juggle this and get the figures to make sense for us. It is very difficult. And I appreciate also the uncertainties that are involved here. But nevertheless, we do have to start from where we are right now, heading in the right direction. And I'm, as the medium-term financial plan does set out what we're going to do, rather than just numbers on bits of paper and pushing paper around. I'm not sure actually that this is a good direction that we're going to be heading in. And I do think, I know that the portfolio holder has said that this isn't about answers right now, but I would like some answers actually, and that's what overview and scrutiny is about. There's certainly a couple of things which I think that residents would be quite interested, they're the people who matter, in knowing what it means when they read some of these bits. If I can refer you to paragraph 4.10, if I may, on where it says that in the middle of it that that the pressure, which is £742,000 of cost pressure, which I think means loss in revenue, has been resolved by the expected resolution of the Way Court East void, and there's a number of lease re-gears. I'm not sure that there's anywhere in public that it explains to people what that means exactly, and how the problem there has gone away. I think they might be slightly surprised and pleased to hear that. There are other numerous issues, but one I'd particularly like to address, if I may, in the key assumptions that are being made, is in issues of recruitment and staffing, and this is covered, I think, in 416 and 425, as well as earlier on, and under the assumptions. We in recruitment, how are we differentiating, as we are taking people on in various roles? We're trying to source from within our staff and redeploy. We've got a lot of redeployment going on and have had since last April, and our staff have been very, very good in changing their changing what they're doing and helping out with the massive jobs when we get pressures of housing benefits and that sort of thing suddenly come online. But as we're taking on jobs now for the future, how are we differentiating between the jobs which require attendance, part-time and full-time, or not, remote working? A job's paid what the job is worth, and is paid generally. Obviously, there's some jobs, receptionists, whatever, who have to be there. They're paid for being there, like security guards are. Some are paid by productivity. Some are paid piece rate. How are we working now and into the future, where people have very flexible working hours if they're working from home, and the ability to do a second job alongside their Waverley job, possibly as well in those situations. Significantly different salaries in the private sector are being found between remote working and working from offices. But where there are significantly different matters of efficiency and whatever, of course, because it's a matter of productivity. But how are we covering that ourselves as things go forward? Because if we're paying people to be at home, they're saving a lot of money on children's nurseries, clothing, lunch, travel. That's reflected in the private sector. The private sector will expect us to reflect that as well as time goes on. And if we're making changes, obviously, as we're taking people on now, on the assumption that we will be able to do a lot of remote working in the future, that's one of the things we've learned, is that we can do that in some areas, obviously not in all. Then how are we reflecting that? So a couple of questions there to get us going, if you don't mind, Chairman.
Okay, in investment property and recruitment. So who's going to take that on, Peter or Graham?
Chairman, I'll do the investment property, and I'll let somebody else brave it do the recruitment.
Okay.
Sorry. So investment property's contingency budget had £742,000, reflecting in the fact that that there was some, well, potentially it was a non-COVID impact. Actually, it was a budget adjustment circumstances during this financial year. So the makeup of the 742 was 500,000 of base budget target that was sitting there, and there was the Way Court East void, which was sitting there. Now the Way Court East void was this year is being covered by the property investment void provision, so it's that's been taken account of. The resolution of that is expected in this financial year, so we don't expect to see that coming through the base budget next year. But as that actually comes into fruition, members will be appraised of it. The 500,000.
So in other words, you're expecting to get a tenant or raise income from that.
Indeed.
Okay.
Correct. The income target itself, we have been chipping away at that over the course of this financial year, and so far we've potentially, depending on the outcome of the next exec meeting, will have achieved in this financial year £460,000 of additional income against that target. So that's why we see in 2021 the 742 adverse doesn't actually carry forward in our projections. We actually are reversing that position. It's been quite a long slog to get there, but it is going in the right direction. So over to Graham or somebody else. Annie, maybe.
Can you just point out on the annexes where you see that 742? That's on Annex 1, where you've got
Annex 1 in
you're
the
saying
column.
in this year there was a 742 impact.
Yeah, and then the following year you can see, so you can say it's investment properties under the anticipated budget variations of Annex 1. Investment properties, there's a line there, it says 742, which is in italics, which is the contingency budget impact. And then to the right-hand side of that, you've got next year's base budget. There's an additional £460,000 coming in. The following year.
That's over and above that which was assumed in the 13.1 for the base budget for this year. So what was in that base budget for this year?
The base, so the base budget had the 500. So that line has been split. The difference between the target and the achievement carries forward in the actual investment target, which is in the budget shortfall line below. So when you add the line up, so the 822, add it to the investment income target, gets you back to your 1.2 million, which is our property investment strategy target. Do you follow, Chairman? There's two figures there. There's negative 822 in the total column in the first panel, and then the second panel addressing the budget shortfall. 4 rows down, investment income property target balance of the 1.2 is 578,000. Sorry. So you add the two together, you get, well, it's actually 1.4 because there was a 200 carry forward from prior year.
Okay.
In target.
All right. Recruitment.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, Annie.
What we know from the last 12 months, and particularly the last 9 months, is that we have a very flexible and agile workforce who've managed to turn their hands to delivering all sorts of projects at the drop of a hat. So in terms of how we staff going forward, we've got 2 major projects running. One is the Recovery, Change and Transformation project, which is on the agenda later, and the other is the Business Transformation project. So we're looking at how our workforce works, we're looking at where it works from and the types of roles that they carry out. As jobs become vacant, the management board have a process of looking at every vacant role and looking at what it needs to do in the future and does it need to be filled in line with the budget pressures that we have and in the need for a more flexible workforce, an even more flexible workforce going forward. So that's how we are looking at recruitment and retention and how we are moving up the workforce with their consent and with their help to deliver projects for the future.
Okay, thank you. Jerry, do you want to come back on those 2 points?
Yeah, I don't think I've had answers to either of them, actually, really, Chairman. So we have to tell our residents that the expected resolution to the Way Court East void it's sorted, but we can't tell you anything about it. It's just another assumption we're going to make. I think that's what we have to say there.
I'm sure that the detail of Way Court will become common knowledge when it's resolved, Jerry. But the management is expecting that it will be resolved, and therefore they're not presenting a problem for next year. I'll come back to it's an assumption then, presumably at this stage, which we're expected to make in our decision making. They're confident in that assumption, I think, is what they're saying. I'll come back to you, Jerry. Let me go to Stephen next and then to Joan. Stephen.
Thank you, Chairman. I was just keen to thoroughly understand the point about the investment property portfolio, and I listened carefully to what was being said. Perhaps I can just put it this way, that initially we had a target over the medium-term period of 1.2 million additional income. We suffered a hit of 742, making the total difference 1.9. What we're now saying is that by a one-off transfer from reserves of the 425 void provision and a resolution, details as yet unspecified, 742 of that will be taken care of, leaving the original 1.2 target. Then if we look at Annex 1, in the anticipated budget variations panel, the next three, the minus 460, the minus 262, and the minus 100. And then those are all, if you like, positive benefits. Can you give any detail about what those positive changes are expected to emerge from? And then I've got the same question for the second panel addressing the budget shortfall, where investment property has a further three positive numbers in the sense of minus 340, minus 38, minus 200. And I appreciate that you add the 822 to the 15,778, you get to 1.4 million, is 200,000 different to the 1.2 for the reasons that you gave. So can you please take us through carefully, as far as you can, where these six numbers, minus 460, minus 262, minus 100 in the first panel, and minus 340, minus 38, minus 200 come from in the second panel?
Peter?
Certainly, Chairman. I will take you through it. So I'm not going to necessarily give specifics on some of these properties because they were deals done in exempt, so I can't really give that away at this point. But I'm more than willing to share, Councillor Mulliner, if you wish to speak after this. So we did a property deal at the executive only a matter of months ago that netted us that combined with a Nuffield netted us with a total of, just add them up, £257,000 additional. Now the Nuffield doesn't actually come on stream until another year's time. So maybe what numbers out from that. Hazelmere Youth Hub has an additional regear of a lease there, bringing in an extra 21, and we have a property proposal going to executive on the basis that is approved literally in a week's time. That will net us an additional £296,000 in this year's budget starting from December. In addition to that, we've got Brightwells coming on stream in 23-24 with an additional 100, and we have the Pump House, which will be on stream in 22-23 of an additional 45,000, which is a relet of a current empty property.
Yeah, thank you. So, I mean, for those who don't know, a regear of a lease means adjusting the terms midway between break points, isn't it?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you very, very much. That is helpful.
Okay, thank you. Joan Hegan.
Yes, I just wanted to pick up on the report, paragraphs 419 to 21, dealing with reserves. When we looked at the contingent budget proposals in July, we agreed that any recovery from the government would go to replenish the existing reserves, but we also flagged the potential for a risk-assessed review of the reserves themselves. And I appreciate that's work in progress, but I just wanted to flag that I still think that's an area with potential that would want to see more fully developed in the next iteration of the plan.
Thank you. Peter?
Yes, Chairman, that is a work in progress, and it will be coming through along with the MTFP to this committee in January.
Okay, thank you.
Chairman, it's Graham. I think if this committee wanted another sort of offline look at the reserves like you did the last time, we can arrange that. And if that's helpful between now and the budget setting, we can have another focus session just to update where we are.
Thank you. I think that might be useful. I will leave that in the hands of the Vice Chairman who led it on the previous occasion. If you want to organise that again, Joan, that will be fine by me.
That would certainly be very welcome.
Do other members of the committee feel that might be an idea? The reserves and provisions are an important part of what we look at.
Yes.
Agreed.
Okay,
Agreed.
fine. Fine, thank you. Mark, did you want to come in at this point? Your hand is up.
Thank you, Peter. No, I just wanted to reinforce that it's not always possible to disclose commercially sensitive information in the middle of a transaction. Much as what's happening at Way Court East and elsewhere is promising, we would be shooting ourselves royally in the foot if we actually disclosed any of it. Thank you.
Okay, fine, thank you. Jerry, do you want to come back on any points?
Well, apart from restating perhaps the question of how we're differentiating between jobs that require attendance and jobs that don't, all other things being equal, ceteris paribus, Chairman, really, no. I mean, I'd like to start with getting an answer on that. If so, then I'd move on to governance at 6.3 on page 15, if I may.
Okay, fine. So do you want to make a point on 6.3?
No, I want an answer to the first question. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. Do you want to add anything to your answer, Annie? I think you gave an answer, which I don't think you can expect to see any savings in terms of compensation for those who are home working. I guess the benefits to us might be from reduced office space rather than reducing the salaries and compensation of our employees. Would that be right?
There is some possibility of reduced office space, and we are looking at terms and conditions that which we would review in a normal course of business events. But there's nothing further I can add at this stage.
And you're not aware, presumably, of private sector companies reducing the pay of those who work from home?
I'm not aware. We've given certain tax advice to the staff relating to home working and benefits that they can claim in terms of heating allowances. And we've made changes to how they claim mileage, because they've normally claimed from Godalming to their workplace. We've made changes to those, which are suitable for home workers, but I'm not aware of anything else at this stage.
Okay. Jerry, what you're going to get?
Thanks. Well, obviously there are a number of businesses, Chairman, and I think I don't know whether everybody knows them, but I certainly do. Businesses who furloughed a lot of staff in the first lockdown and continued their contracts, whether it was us or with other, in the private sector. And found that they were able to get a lot more productivity out of the few staff, and able to meet their commitments with fewer staff, and so obviously when times are tough, that's what businesses have to do, and we do have to reflect that. So perhaps it's just an easier question might be what is our staff. Our staffing bill for the our annual bill for salaries, because I think that's where we should start from, because I think that is our biggest expense that we have, that we ought to be looking at, because we have to look at everything. I've been told that numerous times that everything is on the table. There is nothing that's not on the table. I'd like to know these things, and I think our residents are entitled to know. So, because we're told now we've got, 60, 70 staff coming in a day. We've got 120 who are coming in on various days. So we know that. We know that that's about a quarter of our total number. I think it's about a quarter of our total number of staff. So we've got an enormous number of people who aren't coming into the office. And, in many ways, many of them are doing a very, very good job, because I know a lot of things have virtually continued seamlessly. Other areas, I'm very concerned about quality of decision making, and the governance issues on page 15 under risk management and whatever. I am a bit unhappy over. Often to me seems that people simply haven't read reports, and and if I pick up on it, I'm told that, well, I've got to do all the work. and you know, I think that's a little bit unfair. I think people
All right,
taking responsibility should do the work. So
Right,
you know,
Jim.
I would like to know what's the total staffing bill, salary bill that we've got annually at the moment. Thanks.
I think it's a fair point in terms of are there savings in staff costs. I imagine part of the business transformation work and so on and so forth, there will be cost savings and people savings. Does anybody want to comment on that?
Chairman, do you want me to answer that? So our total bill, including all staff related on costs, is about 17 million, and about 3.5 of that is the housing revenue account cost, and the balance sits on the general fund. And one of the measures we took in this year to balance the 6.6 million impact was to freeze vacancies, and we did that back in April. That has had an impact, and what we've got to bear in mind is we haven't had parts of our organisation that have been switched off. In fact, the demands on the organisation have increased to meet the COVID demand. And so that's why we still have our full complement of staff, and those in areas that were given a lower priority. So, for example, the Borough Hall, which did close in the lockdown, we redeployed those staff to meet the demands of the new COVID responsibilities around grants and shielded calls. So everyone's been fully occupied, and on the whole, things have worked well with staff working from home. And Chairman, you mentioned that there are staff savings within these headings already on this sheet, and you're absolutely right. And we will need to go further than that, because of course we're staring at an £8 million shortfall over 4 years. So, you know, we will be looking to do that in a managed and responsible way that bears in mind the demands of services. So we don't, as Peter said right at the start, Peter Vickers, you know, all of the answers aren't on here, but staff being our biggest cost is definitely going to have to feature in our consideration. But we've got to come back to the fact that we are a service business that is run by staff, whether they're at home or in the office. You know, our role as the management team is to ensure the productivity, but also the welfare of staff. So a whole load of things to balance, and some of that will come out on the items later in the agenda, Chairman, when we look at business transformation and the recovery programme too.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay. Any other points that anybody else wants to raise? Okay. Could I just, from the chair then, say that there are a number of changes that we proposed in our meeting in July in response to requests. So can I suggest that we would continue to feed those into the executive as potential cost savings and expense savings areas? I think in terms of the comments from us this time, I would make a presentational point that the way in which the information has been presented to us is actually quite difficult to follow. I don't know whether other members of the committee feel the same. I feel that having the gross figures, for instance, of the £13.1 million down the left-hand side, so that you could always start with how big a budget is, and if there's a delta to it, you have some feeling as to what the extent of the delta is. When you look at a delta and it says 250, is that 250 out of a budget of 250, or is it 250 out of 1.5 million? There is a difference, and it does help in the way in which you look at that. So I just would feed that through for future reference. I think we've asked questions in terms of some of the assumptions that are made, and we realize that there are some very practical problems, and we still don't have all the answers to that, and we will clearly need to scrutinize the final assumptions that are made in our January meeting prior to it going to the executive and to the full council. I think there have been some questions and thoughts on accommodation and staffing costs, and we would clearly, some of the savings that we're going to need to close the gap will have to come from that. And I think we've also had some discussion on the property investment income, and we realize that's difficult to present in open format, but clearly there are some important areas there where we could perhaps secure more. Jerry, do you want to add anything?
Only, Chairman, I agree in a way with you about clarity, and the trouble is it's difficult to keep all different sorts of brains happy at the same time with how it's laid out, and I do appreciate the problem that officers and the portfolio have in choosing how to present it and hoping to make it easy for us. So I don't wish to be critical on that level. It can always be easier for someone to understand. Actually, what I don't understand, if you could tell me, because I come from a mathematics background, is when you refer to delta, are you referring to change or the rate of change? Because we ought to know if you're going to be using the term.
I refer to the change when I refer to a delta. So that's what I'm saying, is that when we're seeing in some of the numbers the changes, if you like, or the deltas as I would call them, it's a delta to something which we don't know what is the base figure, and it's the base figure that I would like to see.
I use the word change, Chairman, so as not to confuse people.
Fine.
Delta, to me, is the rate of change. Thanks.
Okay, that's it. Fine. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, are there any other points that anybody else wants to make before I close on this item? Okay, then I think in terms of a recommendation, our recommendation is that we have taken a look at it, we've considered the updated plan, we've made some comments and observations, which we would appreciate the executive taking into their consideration in their meeting in December. Are we all happy to approve that as our recommendation?
Yep.
Agreed.
Thank you. Nobody against that? Nobody abstaining? Okay, fine. Thank you very much indeed. Let us move on then to the next agenda item number 7, which is the business transformation project. And I think, is it David Allen is going to give us a verbal update, and we have some data which you've given to us, David, is that right?
That's right, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, page 23 on your agenda papers. I think we've given you a few papers that we recently considered at our business transformation board meeting, so that they're very kind of current. So if I'm going to concentrate on that first paper that starts on page 23 of your agenda, just to talk you through the progress on the 10 projects that we identified on the business transformation programme when we kind of launched it last October, which is when it really got going. So we've got 2 projects that have completed already, which is the revenues and housing options projects. They're right at the bottom of that list. And you can see the cost savings that they've delivered so far. The others are all kind of in progress or yet to start. Now, the post-printing and scanning contract program, which is number 7 on the list, that's effectively completed now. We just got to pull in some of the savings, which we'll do at the end of the year. So the post-printing and scanning projects also virtually complete. We're not kind of meeting on that anymore. We're just kind of gathering in the savings that have been generated by adopting hybrid mail and by reletting the print contract. And that between them, they'll generate somewhere between £70,000 and £80,000 by the conclusion of the process. We're also well on the way now with kind of the customer services programme. So the new customer service centre went live on the 2nd of October, 5th of October, early October. So we've kind of got the 3 primary customer services teams working together now. That's the housing, planning and former environmental services teams, which we call kind of wave 1. And the rest of the organisation will gradually kind of fold in over the next 12 months, starting in probably December for community services, and probably Peter's council tax team will be the last one in, probably sometime this time next year. So that team's established, and we are now heavily engaged in delivering the low-code technology that you may have heard me talk about previously, which is the software that we've acquired that we're learning to write ourselves. So rather than buy one of these off-the-shelf products like Salesforce or Civica or something like that, we got the kind of NetCall low-code solution. We've got lots of RT guys and some of our transformation people trained upon using that, and we're currently writing our own software. So it means that when we want to do something and when we want to change a process or a practice, rather than having to ask somebody else to do the RT configuration, we can do it ourselves.
Which project number is that, David?
That's all involved with customer services. Number
Okay,
8.
fine. Yeah.
It's effectively the channel shift work. The way we're kind of automating things is by doing our own software in this kind of low code environment. And we're working at the moment on the complaints, a new complaints module, a new freedom of information module, and also something for the IT service desk. And then they're kind of relatively straightforward projects, quite simple ones, because they're our first ones. We're doing some easy ones first, and then we'll get on to the more complicated stuff. Particularly at the moment, we're working with our supplier on environmental services, reporting a bin and missed bins and needing a new bin and green waste and things like that. So there'll be lots of new self-serve opportunities coming forward on customer services. So as I say, the centre's up and running. The software's now being written. So we're seeing our kind of plans and aspirations beginning to come to fruition. I think we've already achieved something like £170,000 worth of savings out of our 300,000 target. So we should easily achieve that 300 by the end of the whole process. As I say, we're up to about 170,000 at the moment.
And is that 300 target to be saved in this financial year?
No, not this financial year. No.
So that's a £300,000 per annum saving when it's properly launched. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Most of the rest of the savings will be online by, so we should have about 150, 170 for next financial year. We'll make a few little savings this financial year, and by 22-23 we should have it pretty much all of it by then. The other projects that we're working on at the moment, fairly early in their inception, is the enforcement and inspection project. We're just we're just scoping that out and coming forward shortly with the project initiation document. So this is looking at all those tasks that are carried out remotely, whether it be an enforcement thing or an inspection task. We have lots of people going out around the borough, doing a number of inspection enforcement type roles, and we're just kind of looking at all those roles and wondering if we can kind of roll it up and repackage it in a different way, not dissimilar to the philosophy we adopted when we were looking at customer services, where we kind of did some things at first point of call and put the more sort of difficult technical stuff through to the back office. So this is a similar kind of thing, but working remotely, and that will probably see us working a little bit more out of some of our Rangers offices, remote locations. We may be able to base staff there rather than continually coming into headquarters and then going out again. So we're just scoping that at the moment. And also the future office requirements, which you've kind of touched on in the last item. So this is our hypothesis here is that we can reduce the number of workstations in the Berries. We've currently got 390 workstations in the Berries, and we think, given how working from home's been operating, and looking at kind of climate change things and travel and all sorts of things, that we can probably reduce that to 150 workstations. And if we can reduce the amount of space that we're occupying in the centre, then obviously we can reconfigure and perhaps let out some of the remaining space. And this is all prior to Peter's project, which is looking at the redevelopment of the Bury site in itself. So in that kind of interim period between where we are now, when COVID finishes, it's that sort of 2 to 3 year period. We're looking at reducing the number of workstations and just capitalising a bit on some of the extra space we've got with some short-term let. And we do get kind of a few inquiries for that type of thing. Certainly the police, for example, are looking at expanding their occupation. Anybody who's been to the Berries recently will have noticed that there's an awful lot of police cars in our car park, which is an indication of that. Other projects that we're working on, the building control project is nearing its conclusion now because their IT kit is in. The Horizon IT has been up and running in building control for some time. They needed a mobile solution because they're out and about all the time to enable them to do a small restructure. So the mobile solution's in now. So I expect Kelvin will be able to move forward with his restructure probably early next financial year. The planning review, we've just paused on that. We're going to represent a different projects initiation document on that. There's an awful lot been going on in planning at the moment. Their customer services team has been moved into the customer service centre. That's had an impact on them. And the Horizon project is very near conclusion now. We should be going live with that January, February time. We're in the test period at the moment. That's going to have some really kind of significant changes to some of the functions that they've got to carry out. There should be quite a lot of time saved in a number of areas once Horizon's up and running. So we're just kind of stepping back rather than making some short-term gains to have a more considered look at what we want to achieve there. I know Graham and Zach have been doing some thinking about how they want us to approach that. So we'll be revisiting that early next year. The one that we're currently heavily involved with is the staff travel proposal. So we're in consultation with the staff now, about to go into formal consultation about changing some of our arrangements in there, mileage allowances, essential car user payments, and other such sums and benefits that we previously implemented. So there's a few proposals on there that kind of summarised in that kind of project description. And we are out to consultation staff at the moment. We give the first of 3 all staff presentations today, and we'll be in negotiation with the trade union staff side and individuals over the next few months. We should be in consultation to the beginning of January, with a view to implementing all the changes by the beginning of May, and that process should deliver. Well, we've got a conservative estimate there of 150,000. It'd probably be slightly above that, but we should certainly reach that 150,000 figure.
Okay.
The final one, which is right at the top there, is licensing, which we did think was going to be a project, but I think the combination of coming up with some low-code self-service functions for on the admin side, and the inspection element becoming part of the inspection enforcement project. The licensing project in effect will be picked up by 2 other projects, so it won't be a project in its own right. Okay,
thank you, David. That's a very full report. I've got a number of questioners, please. I've got Peter Marriott, Joan Hegan, and then Jerry Hyman. Graham, did you want to say something as well beforehand, quickly?
No, thank you, Peter.
Okay, I've got your hand raised. Okay, so Peter first, Peter Marriott.
Thank you, Chair. It's good to hear that you're developing software, the low-code software that David mentioned. I don't know how detailed or how complicated this software is, but the questions I would ask at it is it necessary? It usually is with software development to have some form of testing plan. You know, if you go through different versions, then software has to be tested against a standard test plan to make sure it doesn't alter the numbers in any way. You know, and we've seen in COVID just how easy it is to make mistakes in very simple software. So that's the first point. The second point is, if you're doing software development, and then we should be looking at version control again. You know, these are standard processes in any software development. And then finally, archiving. You know, if you're dealing with customers or whoever, and you need to get back to an earlier decision, an earlier statement based on the software, you should be able to repeat that prediction or that.
Okay, thank you. I share all of those concerns. Could I then come to Joan, and then you can take both of the points together, David? So Joan next.
My questions really revolved around discrepancies, as I see them, between information on our budget pack or agenda pack, page 23, and then the budget transformation dashboard on page 27. In the middle of the dashboard, there's reference to general fund savings realised of 328,000, but I can't tie those back to the individual project statuses. And I think that some of it is projects that have already finished that aren't on the completed projects list, but I think we should be able to see where all of the figures claimed come from to be sure they don't get counted twice or don't exist. And then there's also the question of what savings realised mean in the context of these individual tables, because they just don't seem to add up to me. So if we take the housing operations and homelessness, for example, there's a savings target of 50,000 and we've got 68,000 realised, but against the page 23, that's 75,000. So I really am finding it quite difficult to have confidence in the figures we're being shown.
Okay, David, do you want to answer those 2 points? Firstly, the software side, and then the savings and how you're identifying those.
So yeah, I use kind of software as a generic term, really, just to kind of explain how it works. It's what we're doing is writing our own self-serve and channel shift options. So a process that's currently kind of manually delivered. What the team are doing is creating the IT environment and architecture to allow that to be a self-serve option. Now, I haven't had training in it myself. I don't know how it kind of works in detail. The IT team and some of the business transformation team have been trained by the supplier. It's about 2 weeks of intensive training. They have to pass a number of modules because the supplier won't let us use their kind of brand to create a kind of infrastructure if we're not competent to do so. So they kind of watch what we're doing and make sure that we're doing it in the right way. So they're kind of a gatekeeper of their own product and their own brand. There are lots of other councils who also have this same product, and so some of the work's already been done for us. So with something like a kind of missed bin module, somebody will have already written a missed bin module. So it means we don't have to start from the beginning, because 70% of it's kind of generic, and we just need to write the other 30% that's specific to us. And so that's the type of approach we're taking on that. So the kind of general concepts that Councillor Marriott spoke about are all kind of part and parcel of that.
Okay.
In terms of the figures, the difference between the tables is the last table, I think on page 27 that Councillor Higgin referred to, that's the ones that finance have finally signed off, as opposed to our kind of projections and estimates that occur in some of the other tables, which is why there's a difference in some of the figures, because we haven't actually.
Chairman, it's Graham. What we'll do a little reconciliation table between the two. I said Rosie's on the call, and we'll send that round to members if that helps, just to link the two different reports. Yeah.
And would it be possible, Graham, to identify some yearly savings, like what you're expecting to see coming through this year and the following year, when these savings actually take place?
Yeah, that's fine, Chairman. That will correspond with Annex 1 in the report. So yeah, we'll send something around. Okay, fine. Thank you. And then Jones Point, sorry. Well, that deals with Jones Point, doesn't it? Okay, fine. Thank you. Just on the bespoke software, I think bespoke software is fraught with issues, and it sounds easy, but my experiences in the past is that developing bespoke software and then maintaining it and keeping it up to date and touching base with all the other systems that it has to come into contact with is often very attractive to start with, but becomes increasingly difficult as the years go by. So I would put some considerable caveats into that, and I think it's worthy of some. I'm sure it's all been considered, but I always worry about bespoke software. Let's move on. I've got Stephen Mulliner and Jerome Davidson. So Stephen first.
Thank you, Chairman. You're obviously telepathic, and my questions have been answered, so thank you.
Okay, thank you. And then lastly, Jerome.
Thank you, Chairman. I fully endorse your concern about bespoke software, having developed lots of bespoke software in my earlier career and faced the consequences. I have a slight difficulty as a member of the VFM and trying to understand where the benefits are coming from. You mentioned, Chairman, getting a picture of the likely savings over the coming years. What I would like to see is actual savings against our bottom line costs, projected, reported on an ongoing basis. That's the only way I think that we can really see whether the transformation project is delivering what it is planning to deliver. So we need to see the actuals. And the other thing which I think we also need to see, what I would like to see, is what are the costs that we've incurred in realizing these transformations, and what are the ongoing likely costs as we continue the rolling out the transformation program. If I may just say, add one extra thing in terms of savings. In my own experience, putting in transformation projects at the end of the day for service companies eventually means staff reductions. I don't really see that coming through in terms of the transformations reports. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Who wants to go? David, can you pick those points up?
Yeah, I think the table on the end table does set out the savings actually achieved. So that's on that final page.
On an annual basis, I think that's what we really need to see, because you got your projecting this is going to be the forecast. What I'd like to be able to see is the actuals against each of the forecasts.
Okay, we'll have to see if we can represent that slightly then. And there has been a reduction in headcount as a result of certainly on the customer services side.
Okay, thank you. Well, let's draw that to a conclusion. I think may we note with some satisfaction, I think, the progress that's been made in this area. But could we note our concerns over bespoke software? We would like a clearer understanding of the financials, particularly an understanding by year and whether the savings are real, the actual savings that are being achieved. So I think there's a sort of presentational matter in terms of better showing it to us. Are we happy with that as a recommendation? Georgina, you'll put that together, I guess. Is that okay, ladies and gentlemen? Are we all happy with that?
Okay.
Okay, I'm getting nods. Thank you. Okay, then let's move on to item 8, which is the Recovery, Change and Transformation Programme. I think is Kelvin with us?
Chairman, it's Debbie. Kelvin's not here. I'm standing in for him tonight.
Debbie. Okay, right, fine. Thank you very much. Welcome aboard.
Thank you. So I'm here to talk about the Recovery, Change and Transformation projects that come to this committee. This is following an update from the meeting in September. So there were some papers circulated as part of the supplement on page 15 we start. So yeah, the projects that come to this ONS committee are Service Plans, Assessment and Update, the People and Staff Project, the Corporate Projects Project, the Finance Project, Agile Working and IT, Governance Decision Making, and the Future Office Requirements one. This paper summarises the position that we've got to in the last few months or so, and as I say, an update from September. You probably see from the progress made, if you go down into the annex, you can see our objectives are all laid out there for each project, with a bit of a summary about the last month or so. And many of those objectives are now complete. So they're blue, marked blue, and 100% if they're complete. And as a result of that, a few of the projects are looking to close in the coming weeks or so, and move any outstanding objectives into business as usual or other projects that are already taking place, including such as the Future Office Requirements one, for example, staying within the business transformation projects that we've just been talking about. So those projects have been really good at understanding the impact that we've seen so far of COVID, and obviously progressing back to a new kind of normal and new ways of working. And as they close, they will complete some lessons learned back to the RCT board and some recommendations as a result to move forward into service plans and business as usual, really. So I think that's just a quick summary, and really just any questions from that report.
Hands up. I've got Steve. Want to take your hands down if you can, or did you want to ask a question, Stephen, on this?
Apologies, no, it was left up.
Okay, and we've got Jerome has left up.
Likewise.
Any questions, ladies and gentlemen? Debbie, can I just ask a question as to how do we see financials on this? What will be the financial benefits coming out of this, and when will we be able to take a look at those?
So the financial element was a cross-cutting theme throughout all of the projects, and they fed back into the finance project or the medium-term financial plan and 2021 budget. So
we don't see any financials attached to each of these projects, then? No. So the savings that will come, the savings will be there, but they'll be manifested elsewhere. Do I understand that rightly?
Yes, I mean, possibly the one exception is the projects project, because they did work with the finance team to identify projects that should be stopped or put on hold, and they did make a considerable saving into that saving for 2020-21. I'm not sure if it's got the number in this report, but it definitely has it in the project close report, which I will circulate for the next update if that's.
I think it would be, I mean, we are a value for money committee. Whilst I'm these projects are laudable and good, there are some financial savings surely that we need to see. Graham, you've got your hand up. Do you want to make a comment on that?
Chairman, yes, please. Yes. So unlike business transformation, one of the main drivers for the RCT programme was actually to help provide a framework for getting some of Waverley's core functions back on track following COVID. Most of these RCT programmes will have tasked and finished by January and February. So it wasn't actually specifically a programme around supporting the medium-term financial plan. It was more about recovery following the big shock of COVID on the organisation. And some of these projects will just sort of become part of business transformation going forward, and some will simply finish and drop away. So it wasn't, the financial driver wasn't the same as it was for the business transformation programme.
Okay, thank you. I've got one or two people who wanted to speak now. I've got Jerry and then Stephen after that. So Jerry.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I'm just hoping that we're not really going to be in a position in a couple of years' time of as councillors saying to our staff, I'm awfully sorry, to apologise for having wasted your time on this, because I think a lot of this is based on a new corporate strategy for Waverley, and having a corporate strategy to which everything's based upon does require that you know exactly where you're headed and what you're doing, what your goals are. And obviously it's very difficult to measure success if you don't know exactly what that is and what it represents. So I am slightly concerned from that sort of high level approach to this. I appreciate all the work that's going into it, but we do have to make sure it's taking us to exactly where we want to be, and I'm not entirely sure that's been fully defined as such. On a light note, I suppose on page 19, just above the table, it says that the etiquette for Zoom meetings, which is always of interest, it says that we're going to have possibly shorter meeting times to allow for breaks, and the chat function to tell someone, the chair, you need to leave for a few minutes. And I didn't know I was going to have to tell people whether I was in the armchair or on the sofa or what it was. So we might want to think about whether that is really where we're headed. But more importantly, perhaps on page 21 in the middle, it says under the ABC bit near the top, under A, it says now working in partnership with Netcall to deliver some key builds, and then we're progressing. I know what BIFA means. White space MDM. I can understand that if it was MDMA, I think. Converse, which is the opposite, I think, integrations. And I'm not entirely sure that I know what anybody's talking about there. It's not something I've come across before, so a little bit in the dark. On page 23, again, top paragraph, it says, to ensure that learning from the ways of working during the pandemic were captured. And I'd like to see where that learning is written down for me to learn from, Chairman.
Okay,
because
thank
that's
you.
one of the most important things we can do. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you. Stephen, would you like to make your points? And I'll come back to Debbie and we will close. Debbie?
Yes, thank you.
Sorry, Stephen.
Yes, thank you very much, Chairman. Although I appreciate these projects were not intended to be principally driven by financial considerations, will we get a summary of what Graham and Peter think the net result of them is? And will they appear as a cost or a, I hope a fairly small net cost, or a cost reduction in terms of next year's budget?
Okay, thank you. So the corporate plan, I think, is our item is the next on our agenda item, Jerry. So we're looking at that in a second. I think when the corporate plan is approved, I imagine the 80% will become 100%. But there are a number of other items that Jerry made, and then the financials. So Debbie, do you want to come back on that, or Graham, or both? Debbie?
I think to start with, on the business transformation project and the terminology, David, are you still there? Are you able to pick that one up? Sorry.
Yeah. So Netcall is the environment we've bought for the low code developments I was talking before. Netcall are the name of the supplier, and Local's the name of the product. It's actually called Liberty Create, but it's a low code solution. Liberty Converse is the telephone solution that the customer service centre will be using. MDM is master data management, and that's a bit of technology that enables us to tie all our various databases together from all the various service departments, so we've got a proper and reliable record of who the customer is. And Whitespace is software that Biffa use that we need to integrate with our low code solutions and integrate into our current environmental services IT. So they're all kind of various products that all have to kind of fit together eventually.
And Converse?
Converse is Liberty Converse. That's the customer service centre telephony.
Okay. Right, Jerry.
And Graham, we'll put a financial summary together for the next RCT update to the value for money ONS, if that's okay. Picking up Councillor Mulliner's point.
Okay, thank you. And Jerry, do you want to come back?
I was just wondering whether actually in this Liberty, are we using a local firm there? Are they based at Unit 13 of Riverside, down in Farnham?
I can't remember where they're based actually, but I'm pretty sure it's not in Farnham.
Oh, okay.
Okay, fine. Thank you. Well, Debbie, thank you very much indeed. There are some exciting programs there. Our recommendation is to note the progress that's been made, which I think we do. And I think to note the fact that we would like to see financial information on this. And we've made a number of other comments, which doubtless will be taken on board by Debbie and Kelvin. Are we happy with that as a recommendation?
Agreed.
Anybody against that? Okay, fine. Let's then move on to the next item, which is the corporate strategy. Who's going to introduce this for us?
I will, Chairman. It would have been Louise Norrie, but Louise is unwell, so I'll be making the introduction.
Thank you.
So this item sets out the revised corporate strategy. As the report notes in paragraph 4.3, this version includes amendments in response to feedback received from the 4 Overview and Scrutiny Committee workshops in September, and also the all non-exec member workshops on the 7th and 9th of September. So probably the biggest change that you see here compared to the last version that you saw is the overall document structure. So the objectives set out within this revised version are now grouped underneath a number of themed headings, whereas originally they were presented as a single numbered list. You probably remember that. And this change is directly as a result of the feedback received from this committee and the other Overview and Scrutiny committees. So the recommendation is that you as a committee consider this revised version of the strategy and make any recommendations to the executive. Any comments or recommendations that you make will be passed on to the executive for them to consider prior to the final version being put to full council for approval in December. Under our constitution, corporate strategy is one of those documents that can only be agreed by full council. So this document is still on its journey towards that final decision. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I think that this is a considerable improvement on what we saw in our July meeting, but comments will be welcome. Stephen and then Jerry.
Thank you, Chairman. I've not got much to say on this as such, but I apologise. My previous question was not made clearly enough. I am concerned, as we are indeed a Value for Money committee, to know what the previous item's financial implications are. And I just want to know from either the financial officers whether we have a means of measuring what the impact of the previous item will be on our income and expenditure for next year. I simply want to know whether we think it's simply a new way of working with no financial implications at all, or will it be a net saving or a net cost? And I would prefer that we had some idea of how much of a saving or cost these non-business transformation projects are expected to deliver.
So that you're on the previous point, you're on the previous, the recovery.
Yes, and I was slightly sort of told, well, don't worry, we'll come to it in the following one, and we aren't going to. This is a corporate strategy, which is a piece of text, which I agree is an improvement. But I didn't want my previous question to be lost.
Okay, fine, thank you. We'll note that for the previous question, or for the previous item. I've got Jerry and then Joan. Jerry?
Yeah, sorry, Joan, my hand was up from the last item and I'd forgotten to take it down because they're not coming down automatically today, are they? I've been through this in a previous ONS, Chairman, and so we didn't want to talk about it much there. Still not a vision, Chairman, because it's not something that can be envisaged. That is a definition of a vision, but it can be envisaged. Question has to be, what will change? You have to ask of all these things, can't we say of every one of them that we're already achieving them? I mean, if you ask our officers, you know, are we achieving these? They will say, yeah, we're already doing that, actually. They're all motherhood and apple pie and nice things, all things to all men. But, you know, how on earth can anyone know when we've succeeded or failed in achieving these? And I think we ended up, well, I was suggesting that rather than, because it's going to come to December Council anyway, regardless of what we say today. I appreciate the work that's been done to separate them out and things, and it looks better, but it's still not actually got the substance and the defined goals and whatever that would be needed so that you can actually envisage it. It should be called strategic priorities rather than vision, I think, because it's got what are the priorities and for each one of them, the strategy loosely. That's in very loose terms, but that's what it is. So it should be called the strategic priorities. But I think we accepted at that meeting that whatever I suggest, they'll do the opposite. So if everybody would agree that we'll call it the priority strategies, then the executive can decide to turn that round, because obviously it's a rubbish suggestion from me, and we can then call it the strategic priority. So I think that would probably work if everyone could agree to just simply say, no, these are priorities, or prioritegic, if you like, I don't care, strategies, and I think everybody be happy. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I think there are whole academic papers on what visions are and what strategic priorities are and so on and so forth. We could spend a lot of time on that. Joan.
I was sort of on a similar theme to Jerry, actually. I felt that page 35 or page 3 of the strategy itself was quite repetitive in its sections. And I do think we need to decide if we're stating a vision or we're stating a priorities, and they shouldn't sound quite so similar. And certainly the schematic replicates the words above it. So I think in a stylistic format, we should decide on one or the other, but it's a very repetitive page to read through. And I have been trying to turn my mind to the point of trying to find ways that measurable parameters are stated somewhere in the corporate strategy. And I think it comes down to where there are references to individual strategy areas like the economic development plan. But I found alongside the economic development plan reference to the economic development COVID-19 action plan, which I might have been asleep, but I couldn't find anywhere. So I think there is still some tidying up to do, and possibly even a summary of the policies that we are going to be measured against.
Okay, thank you. Just one point from me, slightly similar. I think on the housing and, the climate emergency and the environment section, page 4 of the report, page 36 of the agenda papers. I just wonder whether in the first paragraphs there ought to be some mention of our own housing and what we're going to do. And also I know that then relates to the next section, which is called good quality housing. But we talk about at the end of that section, ensuring the service is financially robust to support improvements to our homes. But I think we could afford to beef that up a little bit in terms of what and when and how much it will cost. I've got considerable concerns about the cost of the existing housing that we have and refurbishing and improving to get to the level that we need. And I would quite like to have more detail in that sort of area. But I have to say that the report, this particular strategy now, or the way it's presented is a whole lot better than it was before, and does very much reflect many of the comments that we made at the last meeting. So Robin, do you want to just reply to one or two of those points and considerations?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So various comments around specific actions sitting underneath the corporate strategy. I mean, that's accepted. The idea is that underneath this corporate strategy, there is an action plan. And of course, the service plans underpin this corporate strategy. So yes, I completely agree. There needs to be detail underneath it, but the intention isn't that all of that detail goes into this actual document. But I think that the signposting and the cross-referencing needs to be correct. I think we'll pick up the points around the page 36 and the repetition, see if there's anything that we could do to clarify anything there. And I've also picked up the point around detail around the housing and the environmental sections of the report. So some useful feedback there, which can feed through to the executive discussions. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, and you might want to consider Jerry's suggestion in terms of what we call this, but I suspect you'll quickly return to something like you've already got. Jerry, it's a good try.
I personally think open to some of the terminology that was suggested there. I think we can look at that as well.
Okay, but it's wrought with difficulty. If you change it to something else, then somebody else will object to that. So I think it's been to this committee before. We had a pretty good airing of it before, and it's been to all members. This is considerably better than it was before. There are a few changes that we've proposed, and I'm sure that you can take account of those before you take it to the executive and on to full council. Are we happy with that, ladies and gentlemen? So we noticed we've made a number of...
Can I comment, please, Chairman?
Oh, sorry, Jerome. I didn't...
No, I was a bit tardy with my hand.
Okay, right.
I must say I'm totally in agreement with Councillor Hyman. Vision statements from where I used to work before are typically fairly short statements as to what you would like to be. And I think what we've got here is far too lengthy, and I would really urge that the executive or you, Roger, taking a look at those bullet points and trying to condense them into a short, meaningful statement which people can latch onto, and then all these priorities and strategic objectives just follow on from that. It's too repetitive, as Jones already pointed out.
Okay, I think those points I'm sure will be picked up. Robin, you're okay with that?
Yep. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, fine. Thank you very much indeed. Let's then move on to the committee work programme, which is item 10. In terms of the work that we had intended to do, I think the major part of the work has been further consideration of the corporate strategy, which we've done, the revised budget for 2021, which was not high, but we've moved into the outer years in terms of the medium-term financial plan. We've done that this time. That will return to us next time. I'm looking at page 42 or section A of the scrutiny tracker going forward. So I think in terms, I think we're up to date in terms of, we didn't have a performance management report this time, unusually. That's because the papers for that were not ready in time for this meeting, but we will need to catch up on that going forward. If we go on to section B, with our work programme, we've got a considerable set of areas for consideration in January. I think, again, the most important thing that we'll need to consider is the medium-term financial plan and also some of the business transformation projects and recovery change that we've looked at today. We do need to keep an eye on that. We will have something on the property investment side, and I think there are other areas. We still need to have Zach Elwood coming in to take us through the economic development strategy at some point. I would like to try and get that into our January meeting if I can, but I think it will become a very long meeting, and we have to be careful on that. I'm very keen to look at the community infrastructure levy and see how that's going. And at some point we may need to do a car parking review, but perhaps that will be part of the MTFP when we come to look at that. So those are the items that are before us. I think one or two of them will need to slip into the second meeting next year rather than into our January meeting. If anybody has a strong view on that, then do speak to Joan or speak to me. I don't know whether anybody has any items, additional items over and above this set of items for future consideration. And lastly, in terms of, there's a couple of references to the budget strategy working group. The budget strategy working group really at the moment is in abeyance. We more or less, I think it's served its purpose, and if we need to bring it back, well, then we can, but at the moment it's not operational.
So Chairman, Councillor Potts has indicated.
Julia.
Thank you very much, Chairman. In terms of anything for sort of a future work programme, what I would actually like to see is a short item. I'm not asking for lengthy reports or anything, but as we move forward with the proposed boundary review, given the potential cost and also the implications in terms of officer time on that, I think that's something that all members should be able to look at and track. And I would ask if that could please be on future agendas as a standing item for us to note as that progresses. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, happy for me to add that as an item for the future. Okay, I've got one or two nods. Stephen, you're next.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, as the last chairman of that budget strategy working group, I entirely agree. That was a group looking at the details of a budget in relatively stable conditions, obviously raising questions about uncertainties attached to certain items, in particular property income, but in the present circumstances with enormous uncertainty and volatility, I agree that it doesn't have any particular role at the moment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any points from any other member, any items to be added or thoughts that they've got on the future work programme? Okay, thank you. If you can leave that with me and Joan for our consideration for the next meeting. Let us move on then to if I can find my papers, which are lost at the moment. The Property Investment Advisory Board. We have a paper which is in open session. We may wish to go into exempt at some point. There is a pink item where we would need to go into exempt. And we may want to consider the meeting on the executive meeting on the 20th of November, and no doubt that will be touched upon. So the reason that we keep this at the end of the meeting is that quite often we want to go into exempt. So I think if we do what we can in open session, I will then, and then we can in effect close the meeting and go into exempt session without a need to come back and have a long open session. So Peter and Mark, I guess you'll do a dog and pony show on this. Is it Peter to start?
So, Chairman, sure. So it might just be easier to go into exempt to have the conversation about the annex where all the detail is. Otherwise, there's very little I can actually say.
Okay. Is there anything that you want to say in open session, either Mark or you, Peter?
Not for me, Chairman.
Okay. Is there anything anybody wants to say in open session before we go into exempt? Okay, so I need then to, what are the points that I need to say to go into exempt?
Councillor Hyman's waving, Chairman.
Oh, sorry, Jerry, you had a point. Sorry.
Sorry, Chairman. Yes, I know. I'm against, in principle, just going straight into exempt when we've got a load of open papers which the public might be interested in and interested in us showing that we've looked at and read. And there are quite a few. There's also another difficulty, Chairman, which is that the papers for Friday have got lots and lots of pink, well, not lots and lots, but a lot more pink papers than are here. And I don't know the extent to which members of this committee are able, therefore, to discuss, the implications of Friday's coming intended decision by the executive. If I can, first of all, turn to page 49, Chairman, yep, where it talks about, fully in open session, the Red Cross building Godalming purchase, and where it says purchase of freehold building with tenant. And I think it's well known that tenant there is a nursery, a children's nursery, and that there might, quite rightly, I think, be concerns in the minds of residents in respect of how whether there's any risk going forwards in that respect, because I think with a lot of people home working, there's going to be and changes in working practices. There could well be a lot of changes in the number of nurseries that we require in the world. In Way Court East, under that, I recall when this came to committee, when the matter went to committee, this committee and then council, to executive and then council back 2 years ago, was it? Something like that, about this time, I think. Where it says in the middle bullet point there, residential conversion, I was assured absolutely, and I do urge people to go and watch the webcast of when the council agreed to that. I was given an absolute assurance that there was no way that residential conversion was on the cards for this property. It was, and that's why we were not discussing that, and we were not going to consider the costs, implications, or anything else in that respect when the decision to purchase that was carried. And I think I was the only one against that because of lack of information. We see their disposal is an option, we're told, and the residents would quite rightly want to know what at any price or what. Are we going to learn from this or whatever? But a little more detail on that would be nice. The out of borough acquisition of a retail food store, which is in white on page 49. I'm allowed to say that, I think, aren't I? Because it's there in the box. with a report to the executive coming forwards. On the 9th of this month, there was an audit committee meeting, and the auditor's report on there made it quite clear that in their opinion, and that's all open, in their opinion, they took a completely different interpretation, which was generally accepted, they seem to think, because it was questioned, in respect of you know, the legal advice which I think we might get at some point, Chairman. So you know, I would just like to note that we're saying two things a week apart, which are completely the opposites to each other, and I think that's might be an interesting thing to note.
Thank you.
Brightwell's Yard, I could go on about. I am going to leave that one for now. There's a lot more to it than is in the papers here. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you. And could I come to Stephen before I then come to Graham? Stephen? Stephen, you had your hand up.
Yes, I've just taken it down.
Oh, you've just taken it down. Okay, fine. In that case, I'll come to Graham and to Mark. Graham?
Chairman, did you want me to respond to Councillor
Yes,
Hyman?
please.
Yeah, okay. I'm not sure what the issue is with the nursery, Chairman. As far as I know, we've got a good solid tenant in there and business is absolutely fine. I don't know if Councillor Hyman's got any other information or whether it was a general comment about that sort of business sector, but I'm not aware of any issues we have with our tenant there. Wakecourt East, there are no proposals on the table or being asked for consideration to convert to residential. It's listed there as a potential option because we always have to look at an exit strategy when we acquire buildings, and we've struggled to let that building for 2 years. That's no secret. So it's listed in there as an option that has been looked at, but it also says under status that we've got an interest from range of potential occupants, and we are exploring that with one. I can't give any details now in open session, but yeah, we are hopeful of finding a tenant for that. And on the point around the auditors, I was at the audit committee. I'm not sure how much time you want to spend at this meeting, Chairman. I don't remember Grant Thornton, our auditors, raising a concern about Waverley's legal advice in respect to property, but happy to pick up a particular point if there is one from Councillor Hyman there, Chairman.
Okay, Joe, do you want to come back on that?
Yes, thank you very much indeed, Graham, for the clarification. No, they were almost I won't call idle, but just things that because they're in open, which our residents are entitled to read. The obvious questions that come to them are, and it was a general comment in regard the nursery, and in Wakecourt East. Now, it's in the papers as being an option, and all I was saying was I was told it's not. So, you know, is that something that's changed? And I'm very happy that you've said to me that realistically, no, it's not something that's changed. So I'm very pleased to hear that, and thank you very much for your response.
Okay, thank you. Right, so ladies and gentlemen, that we now need to go into exempt session. So, pursuant to Procedure Rule 20, in accordance with Section 100A. Of the Local Government Act 1972, we resolved that the press and public be excluded from the meeting during consideration of the following items on the grounds it's likely a view of the nature of the business to be transacted or the nature of the proceedings that if members of the public were present during the items, there would be disclosure to them of exempt information as defined by Section 1001 of the Act of the description specified in the appropriate paragraphs of revised Part 1 of Schedule 12A to the Act.
It's 100I, not 1001, so I can't agree with you there.
Oh, okay, 100I. Thank you for that clarification. Are we okay to resolve that?
I'm just going to close the YouTube stream.